In the heart of South Africa, hidden away, lies a deep hole, Boesman's Gat, or Bushman's Hole, as it's referred to in English. This deep, submerged freshwater cave was first explored in 1977 by amateur diver Mike Rathborn. At this time, nobody had any idea just how deep Bushman's Hole was. In 1981, on his first visit to Bushman's Hole, Nuno Gomes dove to almost 250 feet, dropping down through a narrow chimney that opened up into an enormous chamber. In 1988, he set an African depth record of just over 400 feet, and from that day, Bushman's reputation as a deep diver's cave started to spread. In 1993, Sheck Exley showed up. Exley became the first diver to hit the bottom, touching down at 863 feet on the hole's sloping floor. During this expedition, Gomez performed a sonar scan of the hole and revealed Bushman's to be the largest freshwater cave ever discovered at the time. With a main chamber that was approximately 770 feet by 250 feet across and 927 feet at its deepest point, the narrow entrance is claustrophobic. But once you reach the vast main chamber, it's like spacewalking. For some cave divers, it must have been irresistible. But these places of absolute beauty usually come at a cost, something that Deon Dreyer would learn the hard way. 20-year-old Deon Dreyer grew up in a small town about 35 miles south of Johannesburg and loved adventure in all its forms. He shot his first buck at the age of 10, and by 17, he was racing a souped-up car around the local tracks. Soon after, he found a passion for diving. In 1994, after he had logged about 200 dives, Deon was invited by the South African Cave Diving Association to join them on a practice dive at Bushman's Hole. Deon was absolutely thrilled to go, but his mother, 50-year-old Marie, begged him not to do the dive. Just the previous year, Bushman's Hole had already taken the life of a diver named Eben Laden, who blacked out at 200 feet. But Deon had a deep passion for diving, and in his eyes, the dangers were worth it. On December 1994, during the practice dive at Bushman's Hole, on the way back up at 196 feet, Deon appeared to be fine and was seen exchanging hand signals with his buddy. The group continued ascending, but just a few feet further, at 164 feet, they noticed a light below them. The team leader did a quick head count and realized they were missing one diver. The light below them was that missing diver, and it was Deon Dreyer. He was descending rapidly. The team leader initially tried to swim down to Deon, but after just a few moments, he realized this was a suicide chase and decided to turn back. No one knows for sure what killed Deon. The best guess is a deep water blackout from carbon dioxide buildup. 2 weeks after the accident, Deon's father Theo paid to bring in a remotely operated sub to search for the body of his son. It found Deon's dive helmet on the floor of Bushman's Hole, but there was no sign of his body. Soon after, they accepted that this would be Deon's final resting place. His mother and father placed a plaque on the wall above the entrance in memory of their son. 10 years later, in October 2004, cave diver David Shaw would arrive at Bushman's Hole looking to do a deep dive. The 50-year-old Aussie was known as an experienced technical diver, though his diving career was relatively short. He started diving in 1999 and picked it up extremely quickly, skipping the shallow recreational dives and moving straight to deep underwater wrecks, and then quickly onto cave diving. Dave fell in love with it, and each time he would always look to push himself just a little bit further. Having a career as a pilot for most of his life, Dave possibly had the perfect calm and collected mindset that would be ideal for stressful diving situations. Early that morning, Dave and his team geared up at the edge of the pool, and once everything was ready, they entered the water and began their descent. They used the shot line to guide themselves down, which is simply a guideline from the surface to the bottom. 10 minutes into his dive, Dave started to look for the bottom. Darkness pressed in on him from all sides, and he directed his high-intensity light downward, hoping for a flash of rock or mud. He planned to bottom out Bushman's hole at a depth that no rebreather had ever been taken. Then he would explore the bottom for just a few minutes. Dave touched down on the cave's sloping bottom where the shot line ended, and he started swimming. There was no time to waste. Every minute he spent on the bottom would add more than an hour of decompression time on the way back up. Yet Dave felt remarkably relaxed, sweeping his light from left to right, reveling in the fact that he was the first human ever to lay line at this depth. Dave stopped suddenly when his flashlight caught sight of something. Laying on its back, half submerged in the mud, was a body with its arms reaching towards the surface. Dave knew straight away that this was Deon Dreyer, the diver who had never been found. Dave swam towards the body, and once up close, he could see that the hands and head were skeletonized, but in general, the body seemed to be intact. Dave wrapped his arms around the body of Deon, but it didn't move. Dave then knelt down next to the body and tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't budge. Deon's air tanks and battery pack were firmly lodged into the mud. Dave started panting from exhaustion and had to tell himself how stupid this was. He was 270 meters deep, working far too hard, and was already a minute over his planned dive time. Dave tied a line to the body so that it could be found again and headed back to the shot line to begin his ascent. While he was down there with the body, he felt an overwhelming connection with Deon Dreyer, and Dave knew that he would be going back to retrieve the body. 2 days later, he made a phone call to the parents of Deon Dreyer and promised them that he would get their son's body back. On January 8, 2005, after months of preparation and planning, Dave returned to Bushman's Hole to recover Deon's body. He was joined by an experienced group of divers and even a surface marshal who would be overseeing the dive. After gearing up, Dave climbed into the water and began his descent. The crystal-clear waters soon turned to darkness. He used the shot line to guide himself down while regularly checking his dive computer. It took Dave 17 minutes to reach the bottom, and once he did, he got to work right away. Dave was now jogging along the sloped bottom of the cave, following the guideline to Deon's body. This is where the hard work begins, which naturally increases his breathing rate. Once Dave reached the body, he saw Deon's legs and started to get the bag he had brought with him to put the body inside. But Deon's body was no longer stuck in the mud. It was now loose, twisting and turning in the water, making the task extremely difficult. Dave's breathing got heavier and heavier during his battle to get the body in the bag. The line started to get tangled with not only Deon's body, but also Dave's torch, and the whole operation started to turn into a complete nightmare. But Dave stayed focused and did what he could, but soon realized he had run out of time and had to start his ascent. Deon was not in the bag, but there was nothing more that Dave could do. He turned away and began heading back to the shot line, but after just a few meters, he stopped. Something was holding him back. Dave had gotten tangled in the line and was towing behind him the entire body of Deon. He frantically tried to free himself of the line, but it was hard work, which caused Dave's breathing to turn extremely fast. Eventually, Dave became completely incoherent, and then all movement stopped. Don Shirley was supposed to collect the body from Dave at 720 feet, but when Dave wasn't there at the right time, Don knew something was wrong. He could just about make out Dave's light below him and descended, hoping to help Dave with whatever had happened. But during his descent, Don's diving computer cracked and broke under the pressure. He could still see Dave's light, But without this crucial bit of gear, there was nothing else Don could do apart from ascend. As he reached his decompression stop, he wrote an eerie message for the next diver who was going to meet him. The message was sent to the surface, where everyone, including Deon's parents, heard the message, which simply read, "Dave not coming back." Dave was gone, and everyone knew it. When something goes wrong at this depth at that time, there's just no chance at all. But there were still support divers inside the cave that could need help. One of them was Don. During his decompression stops, Don became so disoriented that he was unaware he was even on a dive. The only thing that saved his life was his grasp on the shot line. Don surfaced 9 hours later after the worst decompression of his life and needed immediate medical care for decompression sickness. 5 days later, the team returned to Bushman's Hole to finish packing up. They said a prayer and sang a hymn to honor Dave, and then they began to retrieve the remaining oxygen tanks and line that was still in the cave. 2 divers entered the water and began pulling up all the line. But as they did this, something became free at the bottom and started to float up towards them. It was Dave Shaw, with Deon Dreyer attached to him. In the end, Dave had successfully brought Deon's body back to his parents, but it had cost him his life in the process. Thank you so much for watching. And if you did enjoy this episode of True Horror, don't forget to subscribe and consider watching the next video.